The 12th century was an age of crusades, chivalry, and secret vows. The Knights Templar had risen from humble beginnings into a powerhouse of faith and finance. They were warrior monks sworn to protect pilgrims, but over time they became a political and economic empire that rivaled kings. Yet in their blinding rise to power, something else was stirring the darkness, a rival brotherhood, born from disillusionment, secrecy, and vengeance. These men would become known as the Black Knights. Their existence was whispered only in the margins of medieval chronicles, an order shrouded in mystery, dismissed as heresy or erased entirely. Some claimed they were rogue Templars, expelled for blasphemy or forbidden practices. Others believed they were a secret military order backed by nobles and alchemists who opposed papal control. As the Templars marched across Europe and the Holy Land, the Black Knights formed in their shadow. Their symbol, a blackened cross on a crimson field, represented not purity and sacrifice, but rebellion and secrecy. Where the Templars fought in the open for God and glory, the Black Knights worked in silence for knowledge and power. No official record names their founders, yet scattered manuscripts, from Toledo to Prague, speak of an order clothed in black, sworn against a white cross. These men rejected the papal blessing that empowered the Templars. They refused to fight under the same banners and believed the church had become too greedy, using divine purpose for worldly gain. The Black Knights called themselves defenders of the true Grail, a metaphor not for an object, but for truth itself. Their creed: faith is purest when it defies corruption. From forgotten abbeys in France to mountain fortresses in Bohemia, they gathered recruits, soldiers, scholars, and excommunicated monks. They became the shadow counterpart to the Templars' shining might. And as the church tightened its grip on Europe, the Black Knights prepared to challenge not only Rome's authority, but the very foundations of divine order. The world was not ready for two holy armies. One vowed to serve God's light. The other vowed to guard his secrets in the dark. The roots of the Black Knights trace back to the Second Crusade, a campaign that ended in disaster. Among the knights who survived the failed siege of Damascus were men embittered by what they had seen: political manipulation, betrayal by allies, and the Templars' ruthless pursuit of wealth. One chronicler, writing in 1151, mentioned the Black Ones who would not kneel. These knights, disillusioned with both the church and the Templar hierarchy, abandoned their vows and vanished into the deserts of Syria. Legend says they found refuge with mystic scholars and Sufi sects who taught them forbidden knowledge, alchemy, numerology, and hidden meanings of Scripture. When they returned to Europe years later, they brought with them an unorthodox theology, that God's truth could not be contained by priests or papal decrees. The church labeled such men heretics. The Templars branded them traitors. But these exiles saw themselves as reformers, warriors of faith who had seen divine corruption firsthand. Their ideology spread quietly through secret brotherhoods in France, Germany, and Bohemia. By the mid-12th century, there existed an underground current of knights, monks, and scholars who rejected papal authority but sought a higher spiritual truth. The Templars called them the blasphemous. The Inquisition called them the hidden order. But among themselves, they took a new name: the Knights of the Black Cross. They wore no shining armor, no white mantles. Instead, they donned black surcoats, a symbol of penitence and defiance. They trained in secrecy, avoided open battle, and focused on protecting knowledge. Sacred texts, lost gospels, and ancient relics the church deemed dangerous. Their motto became Lux in Tenebris, light in darkness. It was this philosophy that brought them into direct conflict with the Templars. For the Templars guarded the church's power. The Black Knights guarded the truths the church had buried. Two orders, two visions of divine service. And a silent war was about to begin. One fought not only with swords, but with secrecy, betrayal, and forbidden faith. As Europe entered the 13th century, both the Templars and Black Knights had spread across the continent, one in the light of papal blessing, the other in the shadow of heresy. The two orders rarely met openly, but their conflict simmered beneath the surface of Crusader politics. Templar commanderies began to report raids on their treasuries, mysterious assassinations of key officers, and the theft of sacred relics. These acts were blamed on bandits or pagan insurgents, yet the evidence pointed elsewhere, to men who fought with uncanny discipline and bore no banners. Rumors grew of an invisible war, one that pitted knight against knight. In France, a Templar outpost was found burned to the ground, a single symbol painted on its gate, a black cross over a white shroud. Some historians suggest that this rivalry began as ideological dissent within the Templars themselves, a splinter faction rejecting their growing alliance with the church and the banking system. But as the decades passed, the two orders diverged so deeply that reconciliation was impossible. The Black Knights' leaders operated like ghosts. Their strongholds were hidden, their members recruited through whispers. Their doctrine blended Christian mysticism with Hermetic philosophy, teachings that emphasized enlightenment through inner struggle, not obedience. For the Templars, this was blasphemy. For the Black Knights, it was liberation. They began sabotaging Templar routes, freeing prisoners accused of heresy, and smuggling forbidden texts across Europe. To the Church, they became the embodiment of satanic rebellion. To the oppressed, they were liberators of thought. This shadow war would continue for decades, unseen but deeply felt. Each burned manuscript, each vanished crusader convoy, and each silenced monk added to the mystery of the Black Knights, an order that refused to kneel even before God's anointed warriors. And when the Templars finally fell, the Black Knights did not celebrate. They simply disappeared, as if their purpose had been fulfilled. The Black Knights were not merely soldiers of shadow. They were seekers of forbidden truth. While the Templars amassed gold, land, and political favor, the Black Knights amassed knowledge, sacred, scientific, and spiritual. They believed the universe was written in divine symbols, and that true enlightenment came not from papal decrees, but from understanding the hidden patterns of God's creation. Their secret libraries scattered across Europe housed texts banned by both church and crown, Hermetic manuscripts, early translations of Arabic science, and lost fragments of pre-Christian philosophy. Within these vaults, the Black Knights studied alchemy, not as a quest for gold, but as a metaphor for spiritual transformation. To them, turning lead into gold symbolized the purification of the human soul. Their emblem, a black cross within a crimson circle, held layered meanings. The black represented ignorance and chaos, the crimson, the blood of enlightenment, the cross, the union of spirit and matter. In their initiation rituals, new members swore upon this symbol to protect divine truth from corruption of earthly power. These rituals were elaborate and deeply symbolic. Accounts from inquisitorial archives, though fragmented and biased, describe torchlit ceremonies where initiates renounced blind obedience to the Pope and pledged loyalty only to the eternal flame of knowledge. Such oaths were seen as heretical, even satanic, by church authorities. It said that the Black Knights revered a sacred codex known in whispered legends as the Liber Obscura or Book of Shadows. This text supposedly contained ancient teachings drawn from Egyptian, Greek, and Gnostic traditions, a map of spiritual ascent that predated Christianity itself. Whether such a book truly existed remains a mystery, but many scholars believe its legend inspired later esoteric orders. While the Templars built cathedrals and banking systems, the Black Knights built hidden schools, sanctuaries where scholars, ex-priests, and mystics could study freely. One rumored site was in the Pyrenees, where local folklore still speaks of the monastery that vanished in a single night. Another was said to lie beneath the old city of Prague, protected by iron doors engraved with ciphered verses. The church denounced all such movements as diabolical, branding the Black Knights as enemies of faith. Yet among the educated elite, their ideas quietly spread. Their influence can be traced in alchemical symbols carved into cathedral walls, in cryptic margins of illuminated manuscripts, and in coded prayers disguised as hymns. The Black Knights had become something more than an order. They were an underground current of enlightenment, flowing beneath the rigid hierarchy of medieval Christendom. To their followers, they were the true custodians of divine wisdom. To their enemies, they were the greatest heretics of the age. And as their knowledge grew, so did the church's fear, a fear that would one day ignite the downfall of both orders. By the early 14th century, Europe trembled under the weight of secrecy and suspicion. The Catholic Church, once confident in its divine authority, now saw shadows creeping at the edges of its sanctuaries, whispers of forbidden teachings, rumors of rogue knights, and the silent spread of heretical brotherhoods. Among these, none terrified the Vatican more than the Black Knights. While the Templars still served openly under papal sanction, their unchecked wealth and independence began to worry the same power that had once blessed them. Pope Clement V, pressured by King Philip IV of France, saw in the Templars both a threat and an opportunity. But beneath this political storm, a deeper fear stirred, the fear that the Black Knights had infiltrated Europe's nobility and even some Templar ranks. Secret reports from inquisitors spoke of a twin order in darkness, one that mirrored the Templars in structure but not in allegiance. They claimed that ex-Templars and rebellious monks had joined this forbidden sect, taking oaths not to Rome but to a hidden master who speaks from shadows. Some even alleged that the two orders had begun to exchange coded messages, suggesting that corruption had infected the Church's most loyal warriors. Whether truth or paranoia, these fears fed the Inquisition's fire. The Church launched a silent war, not through open battle, but through investigation, arrest, and annihilation. Inquisitors scoured monasteries for unorthodox texts, hunted for secret meeting places, and tortured confessions from accused heretics. It is during this time that the mysterious purge of Languedoc took place, a series of burnings and disappearances that official records barely mention. Some historians believe this was not aimed at the Cathars, as once thought, but at remnants of the Black Knights operating in southern France. Witnesses spoke of men in black armor captured at night, their insignia erased before execution, their names struck from all documents. Meanwhile, the Templars themselves began to feel the noose tightening. King Philip's greed for their riches, combined with papal fear of their secret influence, culminated in the infamous arrests of 1307. Yet within the Templar ranks, certain commanders reportedly vanished before the raids, taking with them relics, scrolls, and coded ledgers. Some accounts claim these fugitives sought refuge among the Black Knights, not as enemies, but as allies against a common oppressor. Thus began the great merging of myth. The idea that the last Templars, betrayed and hunted, were sheltered by the very order once thought to oppose them. Together, they vanished into the mists of history, leaving behind symbols, ruins, and questions that no chronicler could answer. The Church declared victory, but the silence that followed was uneasy. In the ashes of heresy, the Black Knights had become ghosts, and ghosts cannot be burned. Their war was not over, only driven deeper into secrecy. And from those depths, a new legend was about to rise, one that would intertwine the fates of both the Templars and their shadowed rivals forever. When the Templars were arrested on that fateful Friday the 13th in 1307, Europe shook with disbelief. Once hailed as holy warriors, they were now branded heretics, accused of idolatry, blasphemy, and consorting with demons. But what history books often omit is that not all Templars were captured. Many escaped, warned before the raids, aided by sympathizers, or guided by an unseen hand. That unseen hand, according to several later chronicles, belonged to the Black Knights. For years, the Church had tried to pit these two orders against each other, the sanctioned and the forbidden, the White Cross and the Black. Yet when Rome turned its sword upon its own, the only refuge of surviving Templars lay in the shadows they once opposed. The Black Knights offered sanctuary, not out of charity, but out of shared conviction. Both orders had been betrayed by the very institution they had once served. In hidden valleys of the Alps and abandoned fortresses of Bohemia, a secret pact was forged. The Templars brought their wealth, coded archives, and military discipline. The Black Knights contributed their network of secrecy, their knowledge of hidden routes, and their mastery of cryptic communication. Together, they formed what later whispers would call the Order of the Veiled Cross, a brotherhood born from ruin, sustained by silence. Their symbol was said to merge the two, a half-white, half-black cross, representing duality, unity, and defiance. Their guiding principle became, from betrayal, truth shall rise. For decades after the Templar trials, this merged brotherhood operated in silence, spreading across Europe's underground. Some became merchants, some scholars, others mercenaries or architects. They funneled their resources into hidden causes, protecting persecuted thinkers, preserving banned manuscripts, and building structures encoded with sacred geometry, cathedrals, castles, even city layouts that align with celestial patterns. Certain masons and builders of the late Middle Ages claimed lineage from these secretive exiles. Their symbols, compasses, pillars, and all-seeing eyes echoed the teachings of both Templar mysticism and Black Knight philosophy. Out of these blended traditions would emerge future societies, Rosicrucians, Freemasons, and alchemical brotherhoods who claimed descent from the knights who vanished into darkness. The Church, meanwhile, celebrated the Templars' downfall as divine justice, unaware that their legacy had simply changed form. While papal agents scoured Europe for hidden treasure, the true treasure, knowledge, was being carried in secret by the alliance that refused to die. Legends from Scotland to Portugal tell of ships flying blank banners, landing in remote harbors under nightfall, unloading crates of gold, scrolls, and relics. Some say this was a lost Templar fleet, spirited away with the help of the Black Knights. Others whisper that among those crates were fragments of the Liber Obscura, the very book of enlightenment that the Church had long sought to destroy. Out of persecution and betrayal, a new secret world was born, one that would thrive in the spaces between religion and reason, faith and rebellion. And though the Templars' banners no longer flew their light, mingled with the Black Knight's darkness, would guide the secret history of Europe for centuries to come. As Europe emerged from the ashes of the Middle Ages and into the Renaissance, light flooded across the continent. But it was not only the light of art and science. Beneath the marble halls and painted chapels, the legacy of the Black Knights and the surviving Templars continued, shaping the rebirth of Europe in secret. The Church believed it had destroyed the heretical orders that once defied it, yet the ideas of those exiled knights had already taken root. Their fusion of faith, geometry, and forbidden knowledge found new expression in the works of artists, architects, and philosophers. The same symbols once carved into Templar fortresses now appeared in cathedrals and palaces, spirals of sacred ratios, crosses within circles, and cryptic Latin mottos praising divine harmony over dogma. These echoes were not accidents. Behind many of the Renaissance's greatest minds were secret patrons, men and women tied to what was left of the Order of the Veiled Cross. They believed that truth should no longer be hidden in cloisters or guarded by the sword, but disguised within art, mathematics, and science, accessible only to those who could interpret its symbols. Take Leonardo da Vinci, for instance. Though there is no proof he was a member of any hidden brotherhood, his notebooks overflowed with ciphers, esoteric geometry, and theological defiance that mirror the Black Knight's creed. Light and darkness. His fascination with the divine proportions of nature, the Vitruvian Man, the golden ratio, reflected a belief shared by the hidden order, that God could be understood through reason, not ritual. In Florence, Rome, and Prague, circles of scholars gathered in secrecy, sharing manuscripts once branded heretical, alchemical treatises, astrological maps, and Templar codices saved from the fires of the Inquisition. These gatherings evolved into invisible academies, the precursors of what later became known as the Rosicrucian and Masonic traditions. Their purpose was simple but revolutionary: to awaken humanity's divine intellect without the chains of religious control. In this, the Black Knights' influence was profound. Their ancient motto, Lux in Tenebris, was quietly revived by humanist scholars who saw themselves as torchbearers of a lost wisdom. Even kings and popes, while condemning heresy in public, sought the counsel of these secret minds in private. The Renaissance obsession with hidden codes, secret societies, and sacred geometry wasn't mere curiosity. It was a flowering of the Black Knights' underground philosophy, wrapped in beauty and metaphor. Templar descendants continue to serve as financiers, builders, and explorers. The Age of Discovery, too, bore their mark. Ships sailed bearing symbols of crosses and stars, guiding emblems that mirrored ancient insignias of both the Templars and the Shadow Order. The world was expanding, and so was the reach of the hidden brotherhood. From the lodges of masons to the workshops of inventors, their legacy endured, shaping not only art and architecture, but the very notion that truth was worth seeking, even against divine command. But power, even in secrecy, breeds new enemies. And as the Renaissance turned toward Reformation and revolt, the Church once again cast its gaze into the shadows, determined to uncover the silent architects of Europe's awakening. The Black Knights had survived one Inquisition, but a second storm was about to rise, one that would threaten to erase their legacy forever. By the dawn of the 16th century, Europe stood on the edge of a spiritual earthquake. The Protestant Reformation was tearing apart the unity of Christendom, and old certainties were crumbling. The Catholic Church, desperate to maintain control, once again began searching for invisible enemies, for those who had over the centuries, spread the seed of doubt beneath its walls. And among the whispers that echoed through Vatican corridors, one name returned like a ghost: the Black Knights. For centuries they had moved unseen, influencing thought, art, and science through secret channels. But now, as priests burned Bibles in public squares and reformers like Luther defied Rome, the Church feared that these upheavals were not actions of faith, but the final stage of a plan set in motion by those heretics in armor long ago. Some in the Curia claimed the Reformation was the Black Knights' revenge, the vengeance of a brotherhood once betrayed by the Pope and kings. They argued that the hidden hands behind printers, scholars, and philosophers were guided by an ancient code, the creed of lux in tenebris, light in darkness. Whether true or imagined, the accusation rekindled the old paranoia that had haunted Rome since the fall of the Templars. Meanwhile, evidence of secret lodges began to emerge. Across Germany, Bohemia, and Switzerland, small circles of scholars and soldiers met under symbols eerily reminiscent of the Veiled Cross, the merged emblem of the Templars and Black Knights. Their meetings were disguised as intellectual gatherings, but the Inquisition saw only blasphemy. In 1535, a document now known as the Augsburg Testimony surfaced, a secret letter between two nobles referencing the order that watches in darkness and teaches men to think as God. The author warned that their hand moves behind every protest, every new thought that challenges a priest. The letter was suppressed by the Church, but copies survived, feeding centuries of speculation about the Black Knights' influence on early Protestant thought. The Black Knights' philosophy had always been one of enlightenment through rebellion, the belief that divine truth must be sought, not dictated. Whether they truly inspired Luther or Calvin remains debatable, but their ideas resonated with the new age: freedom of conscience, individual faith, and knowledge as salvation. The Reformation also birthed a new form of warfare, not by sword, but by pamphlet, sermon, and secret correspondence. Many reformers received financial and intellectual aid from anonymous benefactors. In some cases, historians later traced these patrons to families once tied to Templar states, suggesting that the hidden brotherhood had shifted from armor to influence. In response, the Church launched its Counter-Reformation, led by the Jesuits, the new soldiers of faith. Some historians have called them the mirror of the Black Knights, because they too operated in secrecy, discipline, and intellectual rigor. Yet unlike the Black Knights, they swore total loyalty to Rome. The two forces, one serving faith through control, the other through liberation, clashed across Europe's soul. And once again, knowledge became a battlefield. By the end of the 16th century, the Black Knights had faded once more into rumor, but their legacy, now woven into Protestant reform, secret lodges, and underground scholarship, had already reshaped Europe forever. The Age of Knights was ending. The Age of Reason and Revolution was about to begin, and the shadows of the Black Knights would march quietly within it. By the 18th century, Europe had entered an Age of Reason, or so it seemed. Science, philosophy, and exploration flourished. Kings ruled by intellect as much as faith, and churches, though still powerful, could no longer silence the growing roar of enlightened thought. Yet beneath this bright surface, the old shadows moved once again. The Black Knights, or what remained of their ancient brotherhood, had adapted to the modern world. Their weapons were no longer swords or armor, but symbols, salons, and societies. Their teachings, preserved for centuries in coded manuscripts, found new life within organizations that promised liberty, equality, and the pursuit of knowledge. Among them, none carried their influence more clearly than the Freemasons. Though the Freemasons emerged publicly as a guild of builders and philosophers, their rituals bore undeniable traces of the Templar legacy: oaths of secrecy, reverence for sacred geometry, and references to a hidden light guiding human destiny. Within the deeper, more secretive branches of Masonry, legend spoke of the Knights of the East and West, a symbolic title that many historians interpret as a thinly veiled tribute to Black Knights' dual heritage, born from the East, defying the West. In Masonic temples across Europe, initiates swore to uphold truth over tyranny, knowledge over superstition, the very principles once whispered by the Black Knights in medieval crypts. The phrase Ordo ab Chao, meaning order out of chaos, became central to their creed, echoing the old alchemical belief in transformation through destruction. But the most striking proof of the Brotherhood's rebirth lay not in lodges, but in revolutions. When the American and French revolutions erupted, both carried the hallmarks of the secret doctrines born from centuries of hidden resistance. Liberty, equality, fraternity. These were not merely political slogans, but the spiritual evolution of lux in tenebris. The idea that man could shape his own destiny without divine intermediaries was a Black Knight's philosophy reborn under a new banner. George Washington and many of the American founders were Freemasons, initiates of rituals that trace their roots back to crusading orders. The architectural layout of Washington, D.C., filled with geometric alignments, pentagonal patterns, and cross forms, has long been interpreted as a map of sacred geometry, mirroring the lost Templar blueprints once guarded by the Shadow Order. In France, secret clubs and Masonic lodges became the meeting grounds for thinkers who challenged monarchy and the church. As the Bastille fell, some chroniclers claim that a black flag bearing a crimson cross appeared briefly among the crowd, a haunting echo of the banner that once symbolized rebellion against papal rule. To the church, this was the ultimate blasphemy, heresy turned revolution. To the descendants of the hidden brotherhood, it was vindication. The light that had burned in secret for centuries had finally set the world aflame. Yet as new nations rose and monarchies fell, secrecy remained essential. The church and many crowned heads saw these societies as conspiracies of chaos, tools of the devil or agents of subversion. Persecution followed, driving them once again underground. Still, the flame endured, passed from knight to scholar, from scholar to mason, from mason to revolutionary. The Black Knight's war had evolved beyond swords and sanctuaries. It had become a war of ideas, fought in the minds of men and the halls of power. As the Enlightenment reshaped the world, the Brotherhood's influence became indistinguishable from the very progress of civilization itself. Their ancient motto whispered through centuries of change. In darkness we were born. In knowledge we are free. And with that freedom, humanity stepped into a new era, unshackled, yet still guided by the invisible hands of those who had once defied the Templars. Even as centuries passed and the flames of the Crusades dimmed into legend, whispers of the Black Knights refused to fade. The Templars had been dissolved, their power dismantled by the greed of kings and the fear of popes. Yet the Black Knights, those who had once defied them from the shadows, seemed to vanish not with defeat, but with purpose. Their existence had been defined not by conquest, but by secrecy, and in that secrecy lay their immortality. Across Europe, strange references began to appear in manuscripts and oral traditions. In southern France, villagers spoke of hooded men who rode through the night, protecting relics from church seizure. In Germany, a clandestine brotherhood known as the Schwarz Ritter was rumored to operate beneath cathedrals, preserving forbidden knowledge. In Eastern Europe, legends told of black-armored knights who intervened in times of tyranny, striking swiftly, then disappearing like phantoms. Each story bore uncanny similarities, as if the same order had splintered and dispersed, adapting to survive in the dark. Scholars today debate whether the Black Knights were real or a myth born from collective rebellion, a symbol of those who resisted blind faith and political manipulation. Yet the patterns are difficult to ignore. Across archives, certain insignias, a black cross on silver, a broken sword, or the image of a chained dragon, appear in seals, carvings, and gravestones belonging to men who never officially existed. Some historians argue that the Black Knights evolved into secret societies that influenced Europe's later revolutions and humanist movements. In the Age of Reason, as science challenged theology and monarchy, anonymous benefactors funded forbidden research in anatomy, astronomy, and alchemy. Their letters bore no names, only the emblem of the Black Cross. Some believe these were descendants or ideological heirs of the Black Knights, carrying forward the same mission, to protect knowledge from control, to safeguard truth from corruption. If the Templars' downfall symbolized the Church's triumph over power, the Black Knights' endurance symbolized a spirit of rebellion that no edict could extinguish. Even in modern times, traces of their legend linger. Secret military units in Europe, medieval reenactment groups, and even certain Masonic lodges claim symbolic descent from the Black Knights. Whether true or fabricated, their myth continues to captivate because it speaks to a deeper truth. that light cannot exist without shadow, and that every age breeds those who choose to question rather than obey. Perhaps that was the Black Knights' ultimate defiance, not their battles, but their philosophy. They existed not merely to oppose the Templars, but to remind the world that no order, no empire, and no faith hold a monopoly on truth. Their story endures as a testament to those who fight unseen, guided by conviction rather than creed. And somewhere, hidden in forgotten corners of history, the shadows of the Black Knights still ride, guardians of secrets that were never meant to die. If the Templars hid the truth, who protected it after they fell? Subscribe to the Crit Stories and join the journey into the shadows of history, where every legend hides a secret.